Well, I think we'll go ahead and get started. We want to be mindful of everybody's time. And good evening and welcome to the fifth grade, rising fifth grade parent orientation. And as the slide says, the last year of lower school. And it's kind of interesting this morning while we're doing tonight, the final year of the lower school, Brelly and I did the new families joining us in the Explorer in the first year. So it'll be interesting to see here some of the questions that you may have about fifth grade. They had very interesting ones about Explorers and coming into the school. And my name is Mark Hansen, and I'm the head of lower school. And thank you so much for joining us this evening, where you'll get the chance to learn a little bit about fifth grade. And we always leave plenty of time at the end to ask questions. And if you have questions later on, and, in the weeks that are coming or even into the summer, feel free to reach out to us and we'll do our best to get back and give you a quick answer. I'm going to introduce Brelly Fahrenkopf, and Brelly is the associate head of lower school and also the director of the early childhood program.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. As Mark said, this morning we got to meet new families of Explorers, and it's a little bit hard to believe that it was just a few years ago. A lot of our fifth graders were in pre-K, or our rising fifth graders were in pre-K. So time sure flies, and next year's going to be a special one for all of your kids. We're excited you're here tonight to learn about it.
Thank you, Brelly. And now I'd like to introduce Paul Kegelmeyer, and Paul Kegelmeyer is the director of academic programs in the lower school.
Hi, everyone. Just like Brelly Fahrenkopf said, the fifth grade is a great year to be in. Number one is because they're leaders of the lower school. And not only leaders of the lower school, but the fifth grade teachers have a lot of great things in store for them. And finally, they get to graduate at the end of the year. So it goes quickly. And I say, enjoy the ride as a fifth grade student. Enjoy the ride.
Thank you, Paul. And now I'd like to introduce the two fifth grade teachers that are presenting tonight. Lauren Shunnison, she is the fifth grade team leader, and Shannon O'Connor. And so they'll take it over from here. And again, feel free to put any questions into the chat, or if we're on a slide and you'd like to know something about it, you can certainly come in then or wait until the end to get your questions answered. So good evening, Lauren and Shannon, and thanks for joining us this evening.
Thanks, Mark. Again, I'm Lauren Shunnison. This is going to be my 9th year in fifth grade, which is really hard to believe. I was laughing hearing that they talked about Explorers this morning, because the spectrum of lower school goes from, you probably had questions about, how do you handle having an accident at school, to fifth grade, where we talk about body odor and how do you handle the body odor in fifth grade. So it's quite the spectrum, but we are super excited to have your fourth graders as fifth graders next year. We have been together as a team for all of the years that fifth grade has been in the lower school. 2 of us were in the lower school to start with, and then 2 of us came from the middle school to the lower school. So we are really excited to kind of have the opportunity to celebrate lower school experience and just see all of their milestones as they finish out the lower school. So Mark, if you can head to the next slide. This is our team of teachers, and Robbie Simpson and Vanessa Taglia aren't here today, but they have historically been the sections of 5A and 5B. And if you have older students, you may remember the middle school library, and that is where their rooms have been located up until this year. And then myself and Shannon O'Connor, who will speak in a little bit, we have the upstairs of the Learning Center, which if you're walking down that nice windy path to the theater lobby, our rooms are just stacked right on top of one another. So Shannon and I usually have the top rooms at the very top there. But of course, we've been rearranged this year. So we're in the Mac Gymnasium. We will talk a little bit about the transition to sixth grade, because I know that that's kind of forefront on everyone's mind as they start entering fifth grade is, well, what's next in middle school? So we will talk a little bit about that, but first we want to kind of talk about our experience as the final year of lower school. So if you can head to the next slide. We do follow CARES just like the rest of the lower school, but we like to approach it with 4 main components. And that focus is that fifth graders have compassionate hearts, creative minds, responsible choices, and we know they have active bodies. So our hope is that students see themselves and see those 4 areas in all of their subject areas in fifth grade, and that they work to grow and develop in each of those 4 areas underneath that CARES umbrella. Okay, next slide. I think I'm going to pass it off to Mr. O'Connor.
You are. Thank you very much, Lauren. Hello, everyone. I'm Shannon O'Connor. I've been at Academy since 2002, which is hard to believe, and been in fifth grade and since it became absorbed into the lower school. So it's nice to see you all. I'm just going to spend a few minutes talking about our schedule. The schedule in fifth grade is very similar to a lot of the transitions that the kids have in fourth grade. However, we keep the kids moving throughout from classroom to classroom a little bit more. The day will start in a very familiar manner with morning meeting each day. Each one of us will run that before the students head off to their first block. One unique thing about fifth grade is that we transition during social studies and language arts time. I teach social studies, and Robbie Simpson also teaches social studies, but Lauren Shunnison and Vanessa Taglia teach language arts. So your student, no matter what homeroom they are in, will have either me for social studies or Mr. Simpson or Mrs. Taglia or Mrs. Shunnison. So a little bit of a different schedule for that. Some of the highlights in social studies that we cover in fifth grade is we pick up from a timeline approach where the students in fourth grade left off, which was right at the Civil War, basically, focusing on Ohio's involvement and the role in the Civil War. We take a global United States approach for that and go from the Civil War through the end of World War II with our history approach. And then we take the second half of the year and we build on geography skills by focusing on the US national parks. Sprinkled throughout is geography skills and map skills throughout all of that. Lauren, do you want to say a little bit about language arts?
Sure. Language arts, we are a little bit different from the rest of the lower school. We don't have a set block of time for readers workshop and a set block of time for writers workshop, as I'm sure you've heard about in fourth grade. We follow more of what the students will experience in middle school, which is a cohesive language arts class. So we do a lot of reading, a lot of writing about our reading, and learning how to respond to prompts related to what we're reading about, using textual evidence to support our ideas, and really getting them comfortable writing in response to their reading, because that is what they'll experience a lot in middle school, where they have novel units and they're writing longer essays in response to a book that they're reading. So we do a lot of that. We also stress a lot of independent reading. So the students will hopefully have access to the lower school library. They also have the opportunity to access the middle school library in fifth grade. So we do a middle school library orientation, and they get to learn where all of the different fiction, nonfiction, biography sections are of the middle school library. So that's a wonderful opportunity, because our fifth graders are interested in things that the middle school library has that the lower school library may not have. And we also talk a lot about different types of writing. So we try to incorporate writing both into social studies and language arts, and focus on different aspects of it. We usually do 2 to 3 novel units a year. And this last one that we're actually currently in with our current fifth graders is modeled more like what they will experience in sixth grade. So really getting them to understand that we're not just talking about understanding what's happening in the book, but why it's happening. What does that say about the characters? What kind of conflict is that? What is the author trying to tell us through the story? So a lot of just diving deeper into the books that we're reading.
Thank you. I should have mentioned before when I talked about transitioning from class to class, Mrs. Shunnison and I are essentially partners. And so her students will see me for social studies and my students will see her for language arts. And the same thing happens with Vanessa Taglia and Robbie Simpson. So, but every day we'll have social studies, every day we'll have language arts, every day we'll have math. We continue on with the Envision program that your students have been used to for the last couple of years. For science, there's a transition to Laura King as the science teacher from fourth grade to fifth grade. Same thing in art. There was a transition with, currently it's Jen Jenkins is the art teacher in 5th grade. Health is a subject that's taught by the four of us, the team of 5th grade teachers, along with Mr. Diddy. Mr. Diddy teaches a wellness portion along with health. So we cover both physical health and mental health as part of our health education. PE classes have typically been taught by Jeff Worsler, but there's sometimes we get a little bit of help from everybody within the PE department. Music is with Mrs. McLaughlin and Mrs. Schroeder-Lowry. Mrs. McLaughlin handles primarily the music, and Mrs. Schroeder-Lowry handles other aspects related to our music, which we're going to share a little bit about some of the special things of 5th grade in just a few moments. Tech and Makerspace is handled by Mr. Mitchell. We have scheduled time for both of those classes. Currently, we have 1 tech time and 2 Makerspace times in a rotation. Spanish is with Senora Maloney. And then we do, of course, have flex times where one of the great benefits of this year about the COVID year is that we've had to adapt to a whole lot of things. But we've been making really great use of our flex time, both in terms of making use of our campus and also using it as extra program time in which we can take care of some curricular areas that we're just maybe not able to hit on a day-to-day basis. Next slide, please, Mr. Hanson. Thank you. So is there homework in 5th grade? Yeah, there's homework for sure. There's homework in every grade, but then on a consistent basis, this is what you can count on. Some Envision math homework each night. That usually isn't super involved. We're guessing anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes in order to knock that out. And if your students are anything like 5th graders right now, they're trying to do it at every spare moment to keep it from being homework. Whether they're waiting in line for carpool or bus or whatever it is. Reading, we're going to ask the students to read about 20 minutes each night, really to build their reading stamina and make that into a routine that will carry them through middle school. Writing about reading, Mrs. Shunnison mentioned about how they're trying to really build the transition to middle school in which you're analyzing the reading, not just understanding the reading. And so that's usually about 10 minutes of work each night. Might not be all 5 nights a week, but 10 minutes or so. Social studies, we do have homework. Often it's daily geography based, but there's other times like right now when we're studying the national parks, the students might be doing some research on a particular park, maybe writing a journal entry from the perspective of having knowledge about the park. And then also occasionally there is science homework, there's music homework, other co-curricular classes will occasionally give homework. So these are just from time to time. Whoa, where do we go? Okay, no, you're good. I went through that pretty quickly. So one more slide, please. Organization is a big part of 5th grade. What we are trying to get them ready to do is to transition on to middle school, where organization becomes one of the key components for them having a successful experience. So we do have assignment notebooks. The assignment notebooks are where they write their assignments for each and every class. They are built into the binder that they will have that will be their sort of go-to from class to class and day to day. And one of the other big things that happens with 5th grade as we transition to middle school is we build in more long-term due dates, and they're responsible for tracking those due dates. I can share an example that's happening right now. We have spent the last 3 or 4 weeks introducing them to national parks and how to research and how to find information. And just this last Monday, we set them off on they are each having 5 unique parks. One of them they're doing a project upon. The other 4, they're just doing basic research and writing a journal entry upon. They have 2 of those parks notes and journal entries are due this Friday. The other 2 are due next Friday. The project notes on the park are due next Wednesday, and the project itself is due the following Wednesday. And so these are things that the kids really need to track themselves and really start to understand, like, oh, I'm in charge of my learning right now, and what I do is going to have an impact down the road. It's about building responsibility in 5th grade primarily. We also use Google Classroom in every class in 5th grade. Mrs. Shunison's going to talk a little bit more about that, and so I'll just go over the basic. It's redundant to the assignment notebook as it says, but there's also some additional resources that are available through Google Classroom, such as the class handouts, just announcements to the class as a whole, assignment due dates with instructions. You can learn about the daily work that students were doing in each class through Google Classroom as well. And so it will be an important thing for you to have access to their Google Classroom page. Next slide, please. And I think it's Mrs. Shenison now.
Yep, thank you. So like Mr. O'Connor was saying, we do use Google Classroom a lot, and that's pretty much the primary way that middle school turns in assignments. So we'll go through this much more in depth at our back to school night, because this will be more pertinent to you at that moment. But just to kind of give you an idea of what this looks like, this is my home screen for Google Classroom. So I have linked the science, math, homeroom, language arts, and social studies for my class. So each class has their own specific classroom on Google Classroom. And then Mr. Hanson, if you go to the next slide, there's just a picture of what I would see as a regular assignment posted as a student. So this was a post from February where we had an author's message assignment, and you can see below how there's Google Docs linked. So we often, like Mr. O'Connor said, this is kind of a redundant way to tell them they have an assignment. But what's really nice about it is that it links to Google Calendar. So if they go on their Google Calendar app on their iPad, it has their due dates listed in there. It also allows us to attach any sheet that we might have passed out. So if they happen to leave their sheet at school, or if they can't find it, they have access to a digital copy of that. And then we also can upload rubrics and note pages, which is really nice. And Laura King, I'm sure she's probably on here as a rising fifth grade parent, but she also does a great job with Google Classroom and posting any kind of resources they might need for science. So the kids really get used to it. What we would like you to know as you walk away from this meeting is really that we see next year as a huge transition year. We recognize that this year has been really tough for the fourth graders, as it has for everyone, and that they haven't been leaving their classroom to go to different classes. They haven't had to manage their supplies moving from classroom to classroom. And that then they have this transition year in fifth grade to go to sixth grade, where they will be expected to move from classroom to classroom independently according to their own schedule. So we understand we have a big learning curve next year. I think the next slide is about lockers, which we're really hopeful that they can have next year. And we recognize that typically our fourth graders would have had a locker that doesn't lock in fourth grade, and then they get to fifth grade and they do have this locker that locks. And we talk a lot about working in and out of that locker. We recognize that that might be a whole different ball game next year with not having lockers this year. So truly, we want you to know that we will start slow, and we will make sure that we are really understanding what the kids need as we start the year, since it will be so different from next year. But ultimately, we want them to find success. We want them to feel successful with some kind of organizational system. And that's truly what we want to see out of them before they move on to sixth grade, that they have a way that they can stay organized, they feel confident advocating for themselves, and really feel confident moving into middle school. Next slide, please.
Okay, I'm back. And I just finally clicked on my image. I see it's super dark behind me, so I apologize for that. I'm just in the weird room. Fifth graders, buddy program, we're all looking forward to getting back with the buddy program next year. Fifth graders have traditionally been paired up with the second grade. It's a great opportunity for the fifth graders to take that, the oldest of the lower school sort of approach, and show the fun part of each of their personalities, but also show like, hey, we can be really good role models for you. And I think we're all eager to make those connections again within the lower school and start that program up. So if you have friends or family members that might be in the first grade currently, they will be potentially a buddy for next year. Next slide, please. So some special experiences that are a part of the fifth grade. We're fingers crossed on a lot of this for next year, that we're able to do a lot of these things. There's a few pictures you can see throughout here. The one that's in the top right, that is at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cleveland, Ohio. And the fifth graders have taken a trip up to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as a part of their music experience with Mrs. Schroeder Lowry and Mrs. McLaughlin. They do a exhaustive research project of the history of rock and roll. And we go up to the Rock and Roll Museum and get a great in-service from the educators there. We get to tour the museum. It's a fantastic experience, and the kids have a really, really great time doing it. The other pictures that you see off to the left-hand side are some of the makerspace pictures. There's all kinds of projects that we do throughout fifth grade and makerspace and science. Shout out to Mrs. King. We took your project this year, but there is a solar car project that they do as a part of the regular fifth grade science program. This year we took it over and used it as part of our flex program in fifth grade. And I think that's Josh with his record-breaking speed demon solar car there. We do some great projects where it's kind of STEM or STEAM related projects within fifth grade. Those are just some pictures of, bridge building projects and other sort of projects where they get to stretch their imagination and trial and error and see what they come up with. And we also in the spring have a Shakespeare festival, which has the children not just learning about Shakespeare, but learning about the music and the performance and the culture built around Shakespeare throughout the year. And they spend a good portion of their time, again, with music as a part of this. You'll notice that we left off the overnight experience, which is typically a part of the fifth grade program, but we're just not sure what the future's going to hold with us, if it's going to be able to happen or include too much information about that. Next slide, please. So the transition to sixth grade and middle school, Mrs. Shunnison already mentioned some of this. We know that with what the students have all been through the last 15 months, what all of us have been through, that's maybe something that's looming on the horizon for you. Like, oh my gosh, these kids have been living out of crates and not really leaving the classroom for a long time. How are we going to get them ready? It's a very organized approach that we go through. We mentioned the Google Classroom for homework and resources. Same thing happens in middle school. Email accounts used to be a unique thing to fifth grade. It became a necessary thing for many other grades this year, but one-to-one iPads, again, used to be a unique thing to fifth grade, but has become a more widespread thing in the past year. We are building up to our first sixth grade shadow day. We had to adapt it this year, but our fifth graders this year are going to be taking a tour this Friday with Mr. Carter in the middle school. They'll get to visit the classes, they'll get to know each of the teachers, and they're also going to have an individual question and answer period with the sixth grade teachers. So they get familiar with the teachers, they get familiar with the spaces, they get familiar with where things are, what the lockers look like, and all of that. Changing into PE uniforms is something that happens next year in sixth grade as well. We will take the fifth graders through a sizing experience where they just get to pick out like the size of the uniform that they're going to want to use next year. And that starts to get them thinking ahead, which is awesome. In a pre-COVID year, we would be attending occasional middle school assemblies just to sort of hear how they go and understand where you sit and how they work and all of that. Mrs. Shunnison mentioned the middle school library orientation already. That's fantastic. They get a whole new exposure to books and resources over there. And we have just completed the language rotation where the students get an opportunity to take a few sample classes of Chinese, which is offered in the middle school to sixth graders, to take Latin, which is again offered to sixth graders. And then many of them are familiar with Spanish, and Spanish is another language choice for sixth grade. So we set up the year so that they are ready for success when they leave the lower school behind and enter the middle school. I think, is there one more slide, Mr. Hanson? And there it is. So we thank you very much. I'm sure there's probably some questions on your minds. Mrs. Shunnison and I would be happy to handle any of those. And if there's broader ones, I think we've still got Mr. Hanson and Mrs. Fahrenkopf and Mr. Kegelmeyer there too. So don't be shy.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for your time. I do have a question. I think you made a reference to flex time, but does that equate to study hall for students who are involved in extracurricular or sports activities? Will there be time during the day that they can complete some homework?
It just
In
depends on
between.
the letter. Yeah, it just depends on the letter day. So we like to give them time. We know a lot of them have sports and different things going on after school. So we do like to give them time during the day. It might not always be the whole flex period. We might have an activity that we do or a little lesson that we do, and then they have 20 minutes to start their homework at the end of the day. So it's not always a full 45-minute period every day. But I would say across the board, for the most part, the kids do have time to start their homework at school.
Thank you. And I think the chat is turned off from what I could see on my computer, unless it's my computer, just in case other people are trying to type questions.
Sorry about that.
I think
Zoom
it
is
is. Yeah.
not my expertise, so my apologies. I think I've clicked it now, so.
Okay.
So just if you'd like to unmute and ask questions, that's probably the easiest at this point.
Are the quarterly is it the same like quarterly evaluations, and then is it the same like leveling like that we've been seeing for the last few years, like the progressing, proficient, extending?
I'll do that one. Yeah. Yes, they are. That's pretty standard across the lower school. And so there will be two reporting periods where you're going to receive written comments from the teachers, and 2 reporting periods where there'll be check boxes, and the recording standards are the same. Yes.
You might not have answers to this question yet, just because we don't know how things are going to continue to play out, but I'm just curious. I know you guys added a bunch of additional classrooms this year, and I was curious if you were anticipating keeping the numbers the same, or will those extra classes condense back into larger classrooms? Or
Oh, sorry, I keep clicking. Yeah, I can take that one. So we've had 45. We went from 28 to 45 homeroom sections this year. So as we wanted to make sure we were minding the 6 feet of social distancing, we do anticipate an extra section of 5th grade next year. We have a very large group coming in, and we're in the kind of final stages of enrollment. So our plan is to have 5 sections. We'll be working on the hiring of that. We're currently in the middle of that right now. But there would in 5th grade, there would be 5 sections next year.
I saw there was a question in the chat about the lunch experience. So if we were to go back to life before the past year and a half, lunch is relatively the same experience. We have, I don't know, 6 to 8 tables of 5th graders, and in 6th grade and in the middle school, they get to pick their tables and they get to intersperse between different homerooms. So we kind of build up to that in 6th grade. We start with our homeroom class so the kids can build community and get to know each other. Then we kind of start to break out a little bit, and we'll intermix them with one other homeroom class, and then ultimately build up to where your 5th grade tables are. So you get your lunch and you find a spot at a 5th grade table, so that they kind of have to navigate that. And of course we scaffold that for them as the year goes on. So yes to the 5th grade experience of lunch being the same as 4th grade. I think this year 5th grade and 4th grade have largely the same lunch experience as well, where we are also in the dining hall this last part of the year. So hopefully that answers your question. I heard, is swimming part of PE, or can someone elaborate on PE curriculum? Usually swimming is a unit in PE. The past couple of years, it's been around spring break time. So the kids will just be told a little bit in advance when to bring their swimsuits. And then it is only like 4 to 6 classes, I think. Mr. O'Connor, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not a very long time, and it's not a whole quarter like it is in their other grades in lower school.
I'll chime in about science since I happen to be here.
Thank you.
So there was a question about science. fifth grade science curriculum is very hands-on, very exploratory. We start with a study of scientific process skills measurement, which is kind of intermingled with the study of solar energy. That's where the solar cars kind of come in. And they move, and the kind of year-long theme is how we can help the earth and sustainable practices. So we move from solar energy and talking about renewable resources. In a typical year, we would build aquaponics systems, and we talk about how to get foods, how we acquire foods and sustainable agricultural practices. That lends itself really well to the study of soils and rocks and minerals. And then we go into the study of flight, so a little physics in there, which we're doing right now, which is super fun. And we kind of round out the year with earth processes, which is like volcanoes, mountain formation, things like that. And then oceans, and we talk about pollution, oceans, and things like that. So it's a fun science year.
Thanks, Laura. We appreciate you hopping on there.
Thanks, that
And,
was so helpful.
Pulling double
And,
duty right now.
Also, I can go into physical education if I can a little bit. I know it's about team games. It's team games and physical fitness and how to run that 1 mile. And also, there's a lot to do with physical fitness and getting used to team games, which they will be involved in as they go into middle school.
I see the question about health class taught all year. Yes, it is. It's built into the 6-day rotation. As I said, so we have 3 classes of health in a 6-day rotation. 2 of those are taught by the homeroom teachers, and 1 of those is taught by Mr. Diddy. We focus on both physical and mental health in those classes, and it is all year. That does eventually lead up to later in the year having the talk. I think Mrs. Shenison mentioned it earlier about development, right? About maybe how to handle body odor and what's going on with each other's with individual bodies. And so that is happening for the 5th graders currently this Friday. And that is taught in a group session. But I see there's a question about class size, so I think I'll hand it off.
Sections, I think that will probably be somewhere between 17 and 18 students is the guess right now. It may, it's still early. We're not even to May yet, and there's always some movement of families being relocated and things. So, but I would guess somewhere between 17, 18, 19. We wouldn't go over on 20, of course, in the sections. Other questions while we're all together? We'll give it a couple more seconds here. It's really interesting. This past year has been one. If you were on the live cast a couple Fridays ago, you got to kind of see a glimpse inside the school and where 5th grade is now, and where your children are now in different areas. And so I think it's really, I think it's incredible, their resiliency and how how the students have managed this year. And there's some things about the pods that were certainly benefits. There's certainly some things that we would not want to have moving away from pods, but certainly getting to know the kids really well has been something that all the teachers enjoyed. Getting to know the 4th-year children in 4th grade and the kids in 5th grade. So there have been certainly some benefits to the pods. Steffi Fisher, what sports are available to them? Do one of you want to, the pack of sports, I think is that what you're referring to, Steffi?
Sure, I'll talk about that. I don't want to leave anything out for certain, but there is, so in the winter, basketball is a very big thing for both the boys and the girls. Lacrosse is a big thing in the spring currently, and in the fall it is football primarily. Lauren, am I wrong on that? Is there?
I think there's also field hockey too, but it's still the parent run sports through Academy. It's not the academy sports. That starts in 6th grade now. It used to be 7th grade, but they've moved it and opened it up to 6th grade. So there's a lot of 5-6 5-6 teams, but they're all parent run.
There was a question about the possibility of making up some missed 4th grade activities. I think the big 4th grade and also 5th grade, 4th grade certainly this year was we were unable to go to Glen Helen, the outdoor center up in not Silver Springs,
Yellow Springs.
Yellow Springs. Thank you, Mr. O'Connor. And 5th grade, we're hoping that Heartland we're able to go up, but all of these kind of camps and organizations that are working with students and staying in kind of close confines right now when you sleep are on pause, as a lot of summer camps and things. So we would love to certainly get up to Heartland and have time up there. Are there any 4th grade activities, Kim? You asked this question specifically that you're referring to.
No, it was the one that you mentioned. That was the real heartbreaker.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Glen Helen is as rustic as that trip is. It's a really sad one that we had to, as well as Heartland this year for our current 5th graders. But Heartland is a terrific experience as well. It's a very different one in terms of the space and it's much more user friendly and cleaner, and things work a little bit easier there compared to Glen Helen. But we're hoping for Heartland, certainly. The outdoor classrooms, I think that's a great one for you, Laura.
I didn't anticipate having to talk, but yeah, I'm in the outdoor classroom right now. We use it for 5th grade science. 4th and 3rd grade science also go in there pretty often, and we're just using the outdoor spaces. So that's like Mr. Hansen had said about some of the positives coming out of this pod environment and kind of the COVID-ness of the school it's kind of taught us to be outside a little bit more. So I think that's probably going to translate into next year and years forward, because it's great for the kids. I mean, our cutoff was 14 degrees and we were out. So.
Yeah, and I can piggyback on what Laura said. Even just the stump spaces that are scattered throughout the school, we've learned to make use of those and really enjoy it. I mean, the students often will ask, like, "Hey, we haven't done language arts for a while outside, Mrs. Shunnison. Like, what do you think?" And we're certainly amenable to that. And same thing happens in social studies. With the spread of Wi-Fi all over the place, we really truly can kind of be wherever we want to be. And especially now that the weather's getting better, we're spending more and more time outside. So not quite as hardy as Miss King there out in the Crane Outdoor Learning Center, but we'll make use of whatever space we have.
And certainly if those outdoor classrooms, we don't anticipate taking those down. Some of them, have the shade sails over them, and those are more permanent ones for sure. But even the other ones, there's been a lot of use in those, and a lot of classrooms with the sack lunches, especially now that it's getting warm again, just go out there and enjoy lunch or anywhere with their sit spots. We've always taken advantage of the 231 acres, but certainly nothing like this year where we've been out so much more, and kids have just thrived outside. So we anticipate continuing using all our outdoor resources. Any last questions before we say goodnight? Either in the chat or if you want to unmute.
Can you hear me?
Oh.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I was wondering, how do they transition the language? How does this Chinese and Latin, do they still take Spanish at the same time, or do they have a certain amount of weeks that they're doing Chinese or Latin? Do they make a choice, or how does that work?
They still have Spanish throughout their 5th grade year. In this spring semester of 5th grade, they'll have a couple of classes. I think typically it's 3 classes of Chinese and 3 classes of Latin. And we try to schedule them around the Chinese New Year and Ides of March, so that they can kind of tie that into their curriculum a little bit. So they do have those 3 classes, and it's a 45-minute regular class like they would have for Spanish. And then at the end of May, they'll have to make their choice of if they want to stick with Spanish or if they want to switch and take Chinese or Latin in 6th grade.
Okay, thank you.
And just to add a teeny piece to that as well, the Spanish teachers and not just the middle school, but the upper school as well collaborate. And the same thing happens with the Latin teachers. And so, you know, often if you're going to make a switch, you're looking at making a switch, perhaps going all the way up to the upper school. And so that they get an experience to both the middle school teachers and the upper school teachers within that language choice.
Lauren or Shannon, it says, there's a question, are the individual class lengths the same as 4th grade, 45 minutes?
Yeah, I
In terms of the
just saw-
co-curriculars, yes, but in terms of your normal academic classes?
They are, and yeah, I just saw that. I mentioned before that we're transitioning for social studies and language arts. So we are built into kind of a block model schedule where within the sections of 5th grade, social studies and language arts and math, for that matter, are all happening at the same time. So yeah, there's the standardization of 45-minute periods for co-curricular classes and also our core classes, since we are transitioning from classroom to classroom and teacher to teacher for those individual classes.
Steffi asks, once they choose a language, do they have to stick with it for middle and upper?
I mean, I think it's kind of on a case by case basis, but the expectation is that once you choose a class in 6th grade, that you'll stick with that class through middle school. And then if it's not your cup of tea, if you want to try something different, you can move on to a different language in upper school. And then there are some students who choose to do 2 languages in upper school. So they choose to continue on with whatever they chose in middle school, but then they also tack on a 2nd language.
Thank you, Lauren. Well, thank you very much. Fifth grade's a fantastic year. The kids become wonderful role models and kind of take on being the oldest students in the lower school. And it's a terrific maturation for them, because they really do see themselves as the oldest, of course, but also to help others and to be role models. So we look forward to having your children in 5th grade next year. And certainly as more information, and if we're able to go into Heartland, please know we'll be the first to sign up and make the reservation and share that information with you. And we certainly look forward to all the fun and learning and joy at Academy and the community when we return in the fall. So thanks again, and thank you very much, Mrs. Shunnison, Mr. O'Connor, and for joining and leading us through tonight. And have a wonderful evening, everybody. Thank you very much.